Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Here, the two men vying to become the next Prime Minister have been criticised by the Chancellor for their many spending pledges. Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt have both vowed to cut taxes and increase spending using what they refer to as the Chancellor's fiscal headroom. It refers to £26 billion of extra borrowing. But Philip Hammond has warned that money would be needed to plug the public finances if there was a no-deal Brexit. Here's our political editor, Laura Koonsberg.
What are they willing to say?
Good morning, good morning.
What would they be willing to spend?
Morning.
This contest is getting, hypothetically at least, very expensive. And the man who's been in charge of money for this government is getting worried about the price of ambition.
My concern is that this government has built up a reputation for fiscal responsibility, and the British people have worked incredibly hard over a decade now to rebuild our public finances, and I think it's very important that we don't throw that away. We have to live within our means, and people have to be honest about the consequences of either spending more money or of cutting taxes.
And are they being honest at the moment?
I think they need to be very careful about setting out these ambitions.
Will they listen? Jeremy Hunt wants to spend more on defence, cutting taxes, caring for the elderly, and billions to guard against the damage of leaving the EU without a deal, which he says he'd do if he had to.
We need a comprehensive no-deal plan, because Brexit is about more than slogans, more than belief, more than positive thinking. You can't leave the European Union on a wing and a prayer. You need a plan.
But what if that plan costs billions?
Are you willing to junk the Tories' reputation for being careful with the country's money?
I have walked around hospitals in the NHS where I've known they needed more money, and I haven't been able to give it until the end when I negotiated that big extra funding increase. And the only reason that I was able to negotiate that extra money was because we took those painful decisions. We put the economy back on its feet. And so we will never throw that fiscal responsibility away.
Watch out, watch out.
Having spent years telling the public money doesn't grow on trees or pot plants, the two Tories, Boris Johnson as well as Jeremy Hunt, are making big vows to spend, denying, as the Chancellor says, it would mean more borrowing, more tax or cuts elsewhere.
If you look at it, we've got a very carefully costed programme, and the key thing that we want to be investing in is education, levelling up spending on education around the country. I think that is something that is actually very widely supported.
For their rivals and critics, these vows to spend will surely rankle.
Good luck with your preposterous ideas.
Thank you very much.
Crazy.
For some Tories, promises in the haste of a campaign that endanger their reputation. For the opposition, Conservatives who reach for the chequebook only when they want to win. Laura Koonsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, as we were hearing there, both Jeremy Hunt and Boris Johnson have set out further plans to cut taxes and increase spending. But what would all their pledges cost? As part of our series over the next few weeks on the leadership contenders and their key policies, our economics correspondent Darshini David has been looking at the numbers.
Whoever wins the race for number 10 may inherit an economy that's weighed down by Brexit uncertainty. But that hasn't stopped either Boris Johnson nor Jeremy Hunt from trying to entice voters with an increasing range of treats. Of course, politicians often don't deliver on their financial pledges. But let's take a look at some of their big ideas, starting with tax cuts. Boris Johnson made headlines with an ambition to raise the point at which people start paying income tax of 40% on earnings to £80,000. This would help up to 4 million higher earners, appealing to core party members, but at a cost of £9 billion. And those at the other end of the scale could benefit from a hike in the salary level at which national insurance is paid. That bill could be even bigger. Increasing the point at which people start paying national insurance also appeals to Jeremy Hunt. He also wants to encourage business, particularly in light of Brexit anxieties, to commit to the UK by slashing the rate of tax they pay on profits to just 12.5%, one of the lowest rates in the West. But that could cost £13 billion. What about spending? Well, while both men have a lot to say, neither has detailed their plans in a manifesto. But, for example, Mr Johnson wants to pledge more money for schools and policing, while Mr Hunt has said that he can spare up to £6 billion to help out farmers and the fishing industry in the event of a no-deal Brexit. These plans, if delivered, could boost our pockets and the economy. But where will the money come from? Such vague intentions make it impossible to cost either man's plans. But in each case, the bill could top £30 billion, while the Treasury has £25 billion at its disposal, currently being earmarked to support the economy in the event of a Brexit no deal or otherwise ease austerity. So both candidates' plans could soak up all that extra cash and more. Present plans to reverse spending cuts in other areas may need to be abandoned. Instead, the government might have to borrow more or else saddle taxpayers with a higher bill. Sweetness today could have a very bitter aftertaste.
Darshini David reporting there.
Here today, Jeremy Hunt boosted his pro-Brexit credentials with a pledge to call off negotiations with the EU at the end of September, if a Brexit deal was not looking realistic by then. Both he and Boris Johnson have upset the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, by saying they will use the money he had set aside for a no-deal Brexit to pay for tax cuts and increased public spending instead. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, has this.
Well done. You're the man. Hope you carry your support. Definitely. Fantastic.
Boris Johnson campaigning in Kent today, still ahead of his rival, and that prompted Jeremy Hunt to try to improve his own Brexit credentials. The Foreign Secretary said he was prepared to pull the plug on Brexit negotiations with the EU a month earlier than Boris Johnson.
As Prime Minister, I'll make a judgment on the 30th of September as to whether there is a realistic chance of a new deal being agreed that can pass through the House of Commons. If my judgment is that there is no deal to be done, I will immediately cease all discussions with the European Union and focus the whole country's mission on no-deal preparations.
Jeremy Hunt trying to live down past attacks on the dangers of no deal to woo the Tory membership. Back in Kent, not everyone cheering the front-runner on.
Good luck with your preposterous ideas.
Thank you very much.
Crazy. It's a shame your brother's not running.
Both candidates are also saying they'll raid the Brexit war chest, set aside by the Treasury to soften the impact of a no-deal Brexit, spending it instead on other provisions.
There is, as you know, about 26 billion quid's worth of headroom. The money is there, but we also think there is room to make some sensible tax cuts as well, and we'll be doing that too.
The Chancellor, Philip Hammond, tweeted at the two candidates, the fiscal headroom or firepower built up in case of a no-deal Brexit will only be available for extra spending if we leave with an orderly transition. If not, it will all be needed to plug the hole a no-deal Brexit will make in the public finances.
It is not available for any of these other things, defence spending, tax cuts, into the medium run, if we get a no-deal Brexit. Of course it's not available, it's there for something else. More importantly, or equally importantly, even if we don't end up with no deal, this is a one-year number. This is not a number that's available year after year. If they want to borrow more to pay for tax cuts and spending increases, they should say so and not pretend that there's this money in a pot somewhere. There isn't.
I inform the House that I have not selected the amendment in the name of Margaret Beckett.
That was a low-key burial for some MPs' latest attempt to stop no deal. The Speaker's not going to allow them to choke off money to government departments. Opponents of no deal are investigating other wheezes to achieve their goals. In Brussels, an all-night summit to carve up the EU's top jobs ended in failure this morning. The front-runner to succeed Jean-Claude Juncker at the European Commission, one of his deputies, Frans Timmermans, was filmed being lobbied by the Bulgarian Prime Minister in a break from the talks. Prime Minister Borisov outlines some things that are important for us: gas developments, anti-corruption monitoring, before Mr Timmermans shuts down the filming.
I understand. I'm not sure we should be recording all of this.
Leaders return to Brussels tomorrow to resume talks on who gets what jobs.
Gary Gibbon reporting. No deal, we often hear, is not impossible. Parliament simply won't allow it. Well, tonight that premise is looking infinitely less secure as Jeremy Hunt talks up his no-deal rhetoric. A cross-party group of MPs seeking to block exactly that scenario suffered another setback when they failed to get their amendment debated. It's the second time in 3 weeks Parliament has been unable to get a block on no deal through. So is all talk of it now complete fantasy? The blunt truth is there's little parliamentary time left to stop it. Those working to block no deal now believe they have just a 7-day October window to make it happen. Our political editor, Nick Watt, is here and can talk us through what he's been hearing tonight. Nick.
Well, there's a pretty gloomy atmosphere amongst Conservatives who are hoping to stop a no-deal Brexit. As you mentioned, the Speaker blocked their latest bid today, and the expectation is he'll do the same again tomorrow. And one of those Tories said to me, thankfully, John Bercow has put us out of our misery. And the reason why they're talking like that is they simply don't have the numbers. There are around about 6 Conservative rebels, well short of the 16 they need. And the reason why they need that number is that there are around about 12 Labour MPs who are now prepared to countenance no deal. And as you were mentioning there, they now believe that there will simply be 7 sitting days in October when they may be able to act. That's in between Parliament coming back after the conference season and the Crunch European Council opening on the 17th of October. At that point, it will be pretty clear whether the new Prime Minister has got a deal or whether we're heading into no deal territory. And importantly, it is expected that at least 4 of the current members of the Cabinet will not be in the Cabinet. They'll have time on their hands, and will they be willing to cause some trouble? So I've been looking at this group and looking at the tactics of how they're handling this.
Flickering on, flickering off. In fashion, then out of fashion. The prospects of a no-deal Brexit have waxed and waned over the last year. Now some clarity as both contenders for the Tory leadership seek to outbid each other on no deal.
No deal is not my preferred destination, but if a withdrawal deal is simply not on the cards, then the only way to fulfil the democratic mandate of the referendum is to leave without a deal.
What is vital now is that we commit to coming out on October the 31st. We mean it, we get ready for a no-deal outcome, and we prepare.
All a far cry from the spring when Theresa May delayed Brexit after Parliament had rejected no deal at that time. In Parliament, the changed atmosphere was highlighted today when opponents of no deal failed in their latest mission.
And I inform the House that I have not selected the amendment in the name of Margaret Beckett.
Time and options are fast running out for MPs who fear no deal. They've identified 3 distinct phases between now and the UK's proposed exit date on the 31st of October, with one tiny window to act. Between now and the 24th of July, when the new Prime Minister takes over, only a tiny handful of Tory MPs would rebel. From the end of July until the party political conference season at the end of September, Tory MPs are likely to give the new Prime Minister space to negotiate with the EU. The anti-no dealers believe they will just have 7 days to act during the brief period when Parliament returns on the 7th of October until the eve of the EU summit on the 17th of October.
One figure at the heart of the cross-party group seeking to block a no-deal Brexit told me the lesson from the spring is the numbers only really come together when Parliament is staring into the abyss. With time running out, a legislative route may prove tricky, potentially leaving one final card on the table, a no-confidence vote in the government, the nuclear option for Tory MPs.
A supporter of Boris Johnson believes opponents of no deal are struggling because of a changed mood in the country.
I think the political classes have had a big wake-up call. Look what happened during the European elections, and also when the Prime Minister failed to deliver twice in the lead-up to the 29th of March and then the April deadline. The anger, what we've seen out there. I mean, in my own constituency, when I've been out canvassing and door-knocking, people just do not trust politicians at the moment, and it's quite a sad state to be in for our country.
But a leader of the cross-party anti-no deal group is not giving up.
Parliament acted in the spring. Parliament will act once again. It is unlikely that the moment will come before summer recess. The key period will be September, October. But there are discussions going on across party the whole time. And what there is a complete determination that we will not allow our country to suffer irreparable damage potentially for a generation as a consequence of a no-deal Brexit.
Waiting for their moment. Opponents of no deal believe their time will come. But for now, they are on the back foot.
That was Nick Watt, and we're joined by the chair of the Brexit Committee, Hilary Benn. You accept you've played your hand so badly now that we're basically staring no deal in the face, Hilary Benn.
I don't agree. The last time the House of Commons was asked to vote specifically on whether it was prepared to sanction leaving without a deal, the House of Commons voted by 400 votes to 160 against a no-deal Brexit. Now, we're in a particular moment because of the Tory leadership campaign. The two candidates are vying with each other to be the most hard-line on a no-deal Brexit, and then implicitly acknowledging the damage it would do to the economy, because the spending promises to deal with the consequences of that are appearing like confetti. I think Jack Dromey was absolutely right. When you get to the moment where Parliament is actually looking at this, then I believe the House of Commons will act, because I am still of the view that there is not a majority in Parliament for a no-deal Brexit.
Do you accept what Nick Watt just told us, that it's basically one short week in October? It's 7 days in the middle of October, and after that it's too late, and before that it's too early. Is that what we're at?
Well, Parliament is basically in a state of suspended animation at the moment, awaiting the outcome of the Tory leadership contest. And then we have to see, are there negotiations with Europe? What does the new Prime Minister come back with? But we will come to a moment when we are faced with a very, very stark choice. If the Prime Minister decides, whoever that is, that they want to propose to Parliament we leave with no deal. Now, there's opposition days, but they might not give us one. Could you use Standing Order 24? There may be other legislation the government brings which you could attach an amendment to. But I think there are two real triggers. One is, if the House of Commons votes on a motion that says we do not accept that the United Kingdom will leave the EU without a deal, is the new Prime Minister seriously going to turn around to the House of Commons and say, it doesn't matter what you think, I'm doing it,
I don't understand
I'm not going
when
to
that
do
gets
it, I'm going to do it
tabled
anyway?
Because, you know, Jack Dromey was talking about complete determination. The words of Donald Tusk ringing in all our ears now, please don't waste this time. When does that come?
Well, I think the moment will come in October, because...
So not before then?
Well, at the moment, we are not staring down the barrel of a no-deal Brexit, because we don't even know who the Prime Minister is going to be. We don't know what their policy is going to be. We don't know what the reaction of the European Union is going to be
to try and stop
to
no
those
deal between now
negotiations.
and the 10th of October.
Well, it depends whether legislation comes in the first 2 weeks or not, which might be within scope and could be amended, but that's going to depend on the government. But do not mistake the circumstances we're in at the moment, which are very peculiar and particular because there's a Tory leadership campaign going on, for a lack of determination on the part of MPs, including, I suspect, supporters of one of the candidates who by definition is not going to win. What are they going to do in those circumstances, including some current members of the Cabinet who may well not find themselves in the Cabinet?
So that's where the numbers come, is it?
Well, I think...
it's a no-deal confidence vote.
Well, that is the final option. And we've already seen some Conservative MPs say clearly, in those circumstances, they would not support the government of the day.
What numbers do you think you'll have from Conservative ministers then to, or MPs, to bring down the government? You're asking them to bring down their own government.
That is what they would have to do in voting against their own government in a vote of confidence. I'm not going to predict the numbers because, as you've just pointed out, this has been nip and tuck at every stage of the way. But ultimately, it comes down to the national interest, Emily. We've been taking evidence for the last 3 weeks from representatives of the big industrial sectors in our country, without exception. They've said to us how damaging no deal would be to our economic future.
But
and the
we've
trouble
heard this
is,
time and
well, I know
again.
we have, but that, first of all, the country's economic future is being held hostage to a Tory leadership contest. That's the first thing. The second thing is, are MPs actually going to sit on their hands when the future of the economy is put at risk by a Prime Minister who is determined
just tell
to
me how
push
many
through a no-deal
conversations
Brexit?
you've had. Have you had conversations with Cabinet Ministers, as of now, who you think will join your cause when they're no longer working for the PM?
I've had discussions with Cabinet Ministers before, and no doubt there will be further discussions later on, as was said in your piece, MPs are talking to other MPs all the time, but the moment will come in October, and each one of us as individuals will face a very simple choice. Are we going to allow the economy to be damaged in the way the two candidates accept, the government accepts, or not? And I think at that moment you will find the House of Commons is not prepared
now from your
to
leader?
sanction it.
What do you need from Jeremy Corbyn, and is he capable of delivering it?
Well, he's been very clear in opposing strongly a no-deal Brexit. On that, the party is agreed. But I also want the Labour Party to come out very clearly and say we are in favour, given that Parliament is deadlocked, of going back to the people.
6 weeks on from the European elections, which were meant to be that pivot, that turning point, weren't they, for you?
My view is we need to get on with it, to go back to the people and say, this is the deal that's been negotiated. It could be added to by the new Prime Minister. If you want to leave, that's what it looks like. Because no deal, Emily, has no mandate from the 2016 referendum, because the Leave campaign never argued for a no-deal Brexit.
Hilary Benn, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Well, what about those Conservatives who might once have tried to block no deal? Greg Hands is supporting Jeremy Hunt. We'll hear from him in a moment. But first, Damien Green, Theresa May's former First Minister, has come out in support for Boris Johnson. Why?
Because I think there are three key tasks for the new Prime Minister and the new leader of the Conservative Party. The first is to deliver Brexit, because all the discussion we're having about parliamentary manoeuvres and so on, people voted to leave. People like me who campaigned for Remain should accept the result of that as Democrats. So the first task, which I think Boris is best qualified of anyone, is to deliver that Brexit. And secondly, move on to uniting the party and the country, and then defeating Jeremy Corbyn. Because
you voted Remain, you backed Theresa May's deal, you told us many times on this programme how bad a no-deal Brexit would be for the country, and now you're supporting the man who told us, come what may, deal or no deal, we are leaving. What are we to make of you?
Well, I don't want there to be no deal, and indeed Boris doesn't want there to be no deal. He thinks, rightly, that his determination will mean that we will be able to get a deal.
So just by being determined, you can say that it'll all be fine?
Well, we know what the difference is. We know what the problems were with the deal which I voted for, which couldn't get through, because the current backstop is never going to get through the House of Commons, the current Irish deal, and Boris has talked sensibly about alternative arrangements at the Irish border.
And yet you're supporting a man who said, come what may, deal or no deal, we will leave on the 31st. You told, I'm sure you don't need reminding, you told the Federation of Small Business no deal would be economically catastrophic. That was last October.
Yes, and I would much prefer there not to be no deal.
Economically catastrophic.
There is
You're
one
going
thing.
to tell businesses now, even though you've said it will be economically catastrophic, that you're backing the man who may take us out with no deal.
There is one thing that would be a worse catastrophe for the British economy, and that would be a Jeremy Corbyn government. And I think that the danger of having set one deadline in March and having lost a Prime Minister over it, if we've set another deadline of October the 31st and we miss that, then the political consequences for confidence in the whole political system will be huge, but also it will lead to a general election, and at that state, I will argue for a Tory vote, but I fear a Corbyn government. That would be worse.
Leaving
than
aside the fact that no deal would probably be the quickest and easiest route into a Corbyn government, don't you think that the worst possible thing is trust in politicians at this point? It's based upon people believing the stuff that you say, believing it when you come on this programme, believing it when you tell small businesses that no deal will be economically catastrophic, and expecting that you might still believe it a few weeks later.
Well, I don't want it to happen. I still believe I would much prefer, it would be much better for the British economy
so why
for
are
there
you
to
supporting
be
a man who
deal.
says that's fine, we might have to do it?
Because that's what people voted for, and we might have to do
they
it.
They didn't vote for no deal. You just heard Hilary Benn. There was no vote for no deal.
But there was also no vote for saying after 3 years, OK, we'll have a deal that's been rejected by Parliament, and on the only other thing on the ballot paper will be Remain, will be sort of revoking the 2016 referendum. So I don't think that's democratic. I do think there's a huge crisis of confidence in our political institutions because Parliament as a whole has failed to deliver on the result of the 2016 referendum. And as a Democrat, I fear for the future of our democracy
But why,
if
as
we
a
don't do
Democrat,
that.
do you not fear about what you're doing to public trust, to the political fabric our democracy is built on? When they believe you, when they see you as a loyal supporter of Theresa May one minute, and then see you as the man supporting Boris Johnson the next?
I voted for Theresa's deal 3 times, and it didn't get through the House of Commons. As a Democrat, when I lose a vote, I say, OK, we have to do something else because the people have told us to do something else. And I
Not
take
something
that
else,
about
to
the
completely
deal.
flip side. She tried harder than anyone to make
I
sure
know.
no deal didn't happen, and you're now saying, well, you know, we've tried that, so maybe...
Hang on. She always said at the time that no deal was better than a bad deal. The House of Commons
Well,
has
she
decided...
clearly didn't believe it because she ended up delaying Brexit rather than seeing us go for no deal.
With the consequences, both for her, very sadly, but also the consequences for confidence in the political system that we now see. I absolutely don't think we can go through another deadline and expect there to remain confidence in the political
So
system.
you're prepared.
I do think,
you are prepared then to have no deal.
well, I'm prepared. I'm hoping that it doesn't happen because I also think, as it happens, that focusing everyone's mind, saying this deadline we're really serious about, will make it more likely that we'll get a deal. And I think Boris is preeminently qualified to do that.
Do you think they can't hear you? Do you think the EU leaders don't speak enough English to understand what that means? When you say focusing everyone's minds, are you basically saying this is our trick?
No, I don't mean it's a trick. I just think that if people don't believe that you're negotiating seriously, if people think you're going to slide through every deadline, then they won't negotiate.
But they can hear you saying this. So actually, what are you trying to say?
What I'm saying is
that you will go ahead with no deal.
Well, absolutely. That's what Boris has said.
Right.
And it would be sensible for European leaders to believe him because he has always campaigned on this. We have all seen, those who voted Remain or voted Leave, we've all seen the effects of missing deadlines in the past. So actually, saying this is a real deadline seems to me to change the terms of the debate. I'm not playing a trick, it's just actually saying we mean what we say.
You will be aware, though, that this looks cowardly, expedient. It looks like a man who was sacked from the cabinet for lying, now turning round and saying, I'm in with the new guy now and I'd quite like another job.
No, well, I started off this campaign supporting Matt Hancock, so I didn't...
and he's done the same.
I wasn't doing that. Well, we have both taken the same view, which is that what we want is to deliver Brexit and actually to have a moderate, one-nation Conservative government. That seems to be an entirely sensible course to take, and it will be best for the country to put Brexit behind us, to get a deal done, to exit the European Union, and then to move on to the many other areas of policy that people really care about.
Well, I'm glad you brought us on to that, because tomorrow's Telegraph looks at the Boris Johnson plans for Cabinet and the positions that he would be slashing. We understand DUP, justice, international trade, culture, business. Those are all areas that you'd be happy to see go from Cabinet, are they?
Well, I've not seen tomorrow's Daily Telegraph yet.
Does that sound like something he's serious about?
The DWP is going to disappear from Cabinet?
That's one of the ones they're talking about. Work and pensions, justice, business,
That's
culture.
a third of all public spending. I mean, it just seems hugely unlikely to me.
He would close departments.
And well, I mean, yeah, but...
Did he not tell you this, Damien?
Well, I'm not sure he's told the Daily Telegraph this either, because I just find that quite an extraordinary proposition.
So it's probably not true, is what you're saying?
Well, I have no
hope
idea.
It wouldn't
the
be
first
true.
I heard about it was 3 minutes ago, and I think, as I say, for many of those examples, did you say justice as well?
Yeah. Merging. Could be merging, cutting departments, and those are the ones that they're talking about.
You can always play with Whitehall departments, but I think saying that you wouldn't have a cabinet minister responsible for the colossal welfare and pensions budget would seem strange.
OK, Damien Green, thanks very much. Let us talk to Greg Hands. What's happened to your man, Jeremy Hunt? He's gone a bit Boris Mini-Me, hasn't he?
No, I think Jeremy Hunt, the reason I'm backing Jeremy Hunt is he is the person best placed to open the door in Brussels to get an improved deal. Both candidates, and actually we're all surprised that Damien is backing Boris Johnson, to be honest, but the two candidates essentially are both saying that they're going to go back to Brussels to seek a better deal, but if they don't get a better deal, to have a no-deal Brexit if need be.
So if you were a Conservative member that was terrified of no deal, at this point you'd say, spoil the ballot, not worth me having any choice. I've got no choice.
What I am saying is that the person best placed to get the better deal, to open the door in Brussels, is clearly Jeremy Hunt. The idea that Brussels is going to do something for Boris Johnson that they didn't do for Theresa May, I'm afraid I think that is fanciful thinking. The other difference...
So it's not fanciful that Jeremy Hunt's going to walk through the door and they're going to reopen the withdrawal agreement?
I think it's significantly more likely that Jeremy Hunt, with his proven background as a negotiator, as the current Foreign Secretary, somebody who is well known amongst European leaders, somebody who gets on well, and somebody who actually, crucially for the negotiations, will bring a team with him of people who will help get the deal through Parliament. So that is bringing with him the ERG, the TRG, the DUP, the Scottish Conservatives, and actually say, look, here is the coalition we need to have in the House of Commons to deliver a deal through the House of Commons.
Greg, he's quite hard to take seriously because he's now talking up no deal when last week he was very much against it. He's comparing Brexit to the global financial crash and talk about bailing out the farmers and the fishermen in the same way they bail out the bankers. He talked about spending £1 trillion bailing out the banks, which was out by about 935 billion.
OK, what he's saying is actually, and this is the second part of the equation, who is actually going to be better prepared if you don't get that better deal, which Jeremy Hunt is much better able to do. But if you can't get the better deal, who has got the country better prepared for a no-deal Brexit?
Better prepared
Jeremy's 10-point
for
plan,
an economic crisis that he would be part of creating. I mean, how crazy is that? Yesterday he said he'd choose no deal with a heavy heart, his words. I just don't know what kind of business tells businesses that they're going to go under with a heavy heart when he could stop it.
Because the government is prepared for this, and Jeremy's package, his 10-point plan, he is the man with the plan here, mitigates some of the worst effects. We all agree there'll be bad effects of a no-deal Brexit, but Jeremy Hunt's package mitigates a lot of those effects, particularly on farmers, fishermen, potentially others as well, and actually making sure that Britain is ready and actually brings people with him and are going back to that negotiating table to prevent this happening in the first place.
And he's the man with a plan who in May warned against taking a very hard line in future Brexit talks, saying this would provoke a very hard line response from Europe. It was just over a month ago.
So what was just over a month?
Well, he warned against taking a hard line in future Brexit talks in May, with the 1st of July, and he's already swapped.
But he's not saying to take a hard line. He is saying that it's in both sides' interest to get a deal. Jeremy Hunt, I strongly believe, is better able to open that door, get the deal that we need. But if he can't get the deal, to be honest with people by the 30th of September and say, look, I can't get a better deal. If the Prime Minister and the Cabinet say we can't get a better deal, therefore we're going to have to go for a no-deal Brexit.
Well, that sounds pretty hard line to me.
But we'll be well prepared for it.
I'm sorry, Greg, but Jeremy Hunt makes Boris Johnson look consistent. He's the windsock again. He's been pro-Remain, pro-second referendum, pro-single market, pro-Theresa May's deal, pro-renegotiation. Now he's accepting it all may be about no deal. You're offering your members no choice at all between the two of them.
No, well, I disagree with that, because the choice is about who rather than how. And Jeremy is the person who can open the door in Brussels. He is the proven negotiator. He is the person who's much more likely. Think about it. Brussels arrives Boris Johnson, or Brussels arrives Jeremy Hunt. Who is going to be more likely to open that door to get the deal? The answer is clearly Jeremy Hunt.
Thank you both very much indeed.